Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Joining me are Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford, who is heading up our administration's transition efforts, and David Brinkley, the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Budget and Management. Over the past 6 months, our budget team has been working to prepare a fiscal year 2024 budget, as we are obligated to do. And we will turn this budget over to the incoming administration, which is required to submit the final budget to the General Assembly on January 20th. Today we will be outlining the administration's recommended budget. The transition of power looks completely different from the one 8 years ago when I was becoming governor. Back then, the outgoing administration was making drastic cuts to health care and higher education, core state services, and land conservation funds like program open space, and we inherited a crushing $5.1 billion structural deficit, the worst in state history, and red ink as far as the eye could see. 43 consecutive tax hikes had taken $10 billion out of the pockets of struggling Maryland families and small businesses. We'd lost 8,000 businesses and more than 100,000 jobs, and Maryland's economic performance was 49th out of 50 states. Businesses, jobs, and taxpayers were fleeing the state in record numbers. Reversing this economic disaster is why I ran for governor. I pledged to bring fiscal responsibility and common sense to our state capital. And I know this doesn't usually happen much in politics, but we just did exactly what we said we were going to do. On my first full day in office, we submitted the first balanced budget in a decade, which eliminated nearly all of the structural deficit which we inherited. Instead of raiding special funds and resorting to budgetary gimmicks, we rolled up our sleeves and made tough decisions to tighten our belts. Instead of raising taxes, we cut taxes, tolls, and fees 8 years in a row by more than $4.7 billion. And we put all of that money back into the pockets of hardworking Maryland families, businesses, and retirees. These were the largest tax cuts in state history and included the Retirement Tax Elimination Act, which we enacted this year. Instead of a record deficit, we are leaving a long-term budget surplus and a record $5.5 billion in reserves, a complete $10 billion economic turnaround. We inherited the worst fiscal situation ever, and we are not just leaving the state's finances in better shape than we found them, but leaving it in the best fiscal position that the state has ever been in history. Maintaining strong reserves and ongoing budget sustainability is critical to preserving our AAA bond rating. And the state is now prepared for any future challenges or economic downturns. Our fiscal year 2024 budget recommendation calls for maintaining a sizable surplus and keeping the rainy day fund at a record $2.9 billion, which is 12% of general fund revenues. With continued inflation and economic uncertainty at the national level, we believe this is critically important, and it would be a mistake for the legislature to use its newly expanded budgetary power to return to the old habits of raiding the rainy day fund or recklessly spending down the surplus. We've worked too hard and made too much progress to turn back the clock. Because of our strong fiscal position, we are able to continue to fully fund our top priorities, including education, which our administration has record funded for 8 years in a row, investing a total of $55 billion into local schools, going above and beyond the funding formulas proposed by the legislature. This budget continues that record funding for public schools for the 9th straight year, while also providing $10 million more in support for non-public schools to address learning loss caused by the pandemic, and $10 million for the very successful Boost program, which provides scholarships for deserving low-income, high-need families to be able to attend the school of their choice. We've already provided over 15,000 scholarships for deserving students. And this extremely popular program has exceeded even the most optimistic expectations, and we want even more families to have these life-changing opportunities. We've led the way in rejecting the calls to defund the police, or as one elected official in Baltimore City called for, quote, eliminating the police department altogether. Through our $500 million Refund the Police initiative, we've made historic investments in law enforcement and public safety, and now many cities and states across the country are following our lead. This FY 2024 budget continues to enhance the Refund the Police initiative, providing more than $500 million to help recruit and retain more quality officers, to increase diversity, expand community policing efforts, improve training, to teach better de-escalation techniques, and to provide body cams and other technology and equipment upgrades for state and local police. This budget continues that support while also advancing targeted investments to support public safety, including $30 million to continue funding victim services at record levels, $2.5 million for innovative technologies that will help apprehend more violent offenders, including an AI-based gun detection pilot program and a new automated ballistics imaging system for the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. We're also including another $5 million to advance state and local efforts to address the rise in hate crimes and acts of anti-Semitism. Building on the work group of our Asian American Hate Crimes Work Group, we're committing $800,000 in funding to the University of Maryland's Merrill College of Journalism to establish a program focused on educating journalists who will focus on issues of interest to Asian Americans and shine a light on the challenges of hate and discrimination. We have had one of the strongest economic and health recoveries in America. And to continue on that trajectory, we have included $220 million in comprehensive and transformative healthcare investments to further improve access to quality care in vulnerable and rural communities, including $100 million to replace the aging hospital in Easton, parts of which date back to the early 1900s, with a new 230-acre University of Maryland Regional Medical Center that will offer advanced clinical care to residents on the Eastern Shore. This is an idea that the community has been pleading for years, if not decades. It's desperately needed, and we are finally in a financial position to be able to make this critical investment. This budget also includes a $100 million commitment to Sheppard Pratt for expanded capacity at its new campus in Elkridge, a new children's hospital in Towson with specialized youth mental health services, the establishment of a neuroimaging center to advance cutting-edge research, and a global training center for workforce development. All of this constitutes a major leap forward for behavioral health in Maryland. To advance Meredith Health's new School of Osteopathic Medicine in Hagerstown, which will educate and prepare the next generation of physicians to serve patients and help improve access to quality care in Western Maryland. This budget also includes $10 million. And lastly, the budget invests $10 million to help build a new Kennedy Krieger Innovative Care Center on its East Baltimore campus to serve more patients, expand care for children and teens with complex needs, and to provide youth mental health services. These are all transformative projects that will expand care for vulnerable communities across the state. And I want to thank some of the leaders of these hospitals for being here today. Dr. Mohan Santha, the President and CEO of the University of Maryland Medical System, and Alan Butler, Chairman of the UMS Board of Directors, Dr. Hirsch Travity, CEO of Sheppard Pratt, Dr. Malik Joshi, CEO of Meredith Health, and Dr. Nancy Grasmick, the Chair of the Kennedy Krieger Institute Board of Directors. I thank you all for being here, and thank you for all of your great work in healthcare. To continue Maryland's leadership on environmental stewardship, this budget once again fully funds all Chesapeake Bay restoration efforts, just as we have done 7 years in a row. And after working to repair the damage done by previous years of rating bay funding and program open space and funding for state parks, this budget invests $102 million to fully restore the program 8 years ahead of schedule, so that these important conservation projects and priorities can all be accelerated and accomplished. To continue our efforts to revitalize communities and expand opportunities, we invest more than $145 million in targeted investments, including $70 million for rental housing and home ownership programs, $50 million to extend the very successful Project Restore and other neighborhood business development programs, which have helped hundreds of the smallest of small businesses all across the state. We also include an additional $25 million for Project Core to continue the efforts to remove blighted buildings to make way for neighborhood revitalization in Baltimore. Through our Project Core initiative, we've demolished and cleared more than 5,000 blighted structures in Baltimore City, which allowed us to leverage more than $2 billion in private investments to revitalize communities. And to continue the momentum of Maryland's strong economic recovery, this budget includes another $15 million for the Jobs That Build initiative, which is the first program of its kind in the nation, to provide incentives for hiring and retaining skilled construction workers to boost major infrastructure projects. This budget also provides another $1 million for the innovative Global Gateway Initiative, which provides startup resources to attract more foreign companies to Maryland. Our work on the 2024 budget is now complete, and we will be turning it over to the incoming governor and his team. The new administration is required by law to submit its final FY 2024 budget no later than Friday, January 20th. I want to express my appreciation to the entire Hogan-Rutherford administration for all of the hard work that has helped us be in this economic position. And I want to commend Secretary Brinkley and his entire team at the Department of Budget and Management for all of their incredible work in preparing this budget, particularly Deputy Budget Secretary Mark Nicole, Operating Budget Director Andrew Price, along with Terry Garrity and Christina Perotti from the Office of Capital Budgeting. And they and their teams have once again done an exceptional job. And we're proud to be leaving the state of Maryland's budget and its economy in the best shape that it has ever been in. And I believe that this is a shining example that we truly have changed Maryland for the better. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor, who's going to talk some about our major investments in behavioral health.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. I want to personally highlight a major budget item to advance health care in the state of Maryland. As the governor just mentioned, we're recommending $100 million to Sheppard Pratt. This is a monumental investment that could impact the lives of thousands of Marylanders. Through our 8 years, Sheppard Pratt has been and remains an important partner in helping us address the needs of Marylanders who are facing mental and behavioral health challenges. I want to thank them for their collaboration, not only with myself, but with our entire administration. And with this $100 million, Sheppard Pratt seeks to build a 21st century behavioral health infrastructure that is unmatched anywhere else in this country. And as was mentioned, their plan is to expand their inpatient bed capacity and creating a dedicated children's hospital for behavioral health. They will be also funding research to focus on brain health and creating a global training center that will focus on the future of a culturally diverse mental health workforce. Governor Hogan and I have long made mental and behavioral health a priority in the state of Maryland. In 2015, the governor created the Heroin and Opioid Emergency Task Force and later declared a state of emergency. I was chosen to chair that task force and have become a steadfast advocate for all Marylanders in need by leading the Commission to Study Mental and Behavioral Health, as well as the Interagency Heroin and Opioid Coordinating Council. Our goal was clear, and that is to save lives. I've traveled the state and learned how we can better provide access to care and resources, and have heard countless stories and have seen firsthand the devastating reality of those who are suffering, those Marylanders who are suffering with mental and behavioral health issues, and particularly the impact on their families. Our efforts and victories and fighting must continue in order to create a lasting change for future generations. Our consistent progress must not be halted, but only accelerated because the lives of Marylanders depend on this. And this funding for Shepherd Pratt is a major step in carrying on the legacy we started together with our state agencies, community partners, and local leaders. And so with that, thank you. I'll turn it back over to the governor.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I thanked our entire administration. I thanked the budget secretary and his team, but I just want to take a moment to thank my wingman for 8 years of tremendous work. I got a little emotional there, jeez. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions.
Governor, how much input did the incoming administration have on setting the preliminary budget? And can you compare that a little bit to how much input you got in setting your first budget?
I think our budget teams have been meeting on an ongoing basis for many, many weeks, and I think it's at least every week and probably every day that they're talking. You know, so they'll be able to make whatever changes they want to make, but I think there have been great discussions, and we're hoping that all of the work that's been going on for 6 months will be able to continue.
Governor, you alluded to it earlier. Unlike the last 8 years now, the House, Senate, and the executive branch will be all Democratic, and they have a large surplus. You alluded to it earlier. What are your fears for this, or concerns for this coming session?
Well, the great news is we're in a really good position, and we have this record surplus. I obviously ran for governor because of what I thought were mistakes in the past of putting us in such a bad fiscal situation. I would just, caution them not to try to return when you have a monopoly and everybody's in one direction. You don't have the balance that we've had to have for the past 8 years. And I would just caution both the legislature, who now has given themselves much more budgetary power, and the incoming governor to keep in mind that we're in great shape and that the people of Maryland are very pleased with the direction that the state is currently heading. So I wouldn't suggest slamming on the brakes or returning to the pre-2014 budget work.
Could you say something about what the numbers are? What is the surplus? And does that not include the rainy day fund? How much is it? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'll let Secretary Brinkley address the details.
Yeah, and you keep in mind, I'll point out that when you look at some of the DLS spending affordability reports, last time when we were looking at that 8 years ago, they were presuming a 5% surplus. Now they're presuming a 10% surplus moving forward. Where's Mark? He's in the corner here. I think we have a which way?
Right there.
Mark,
Answer.
our cash is combined now in the four range, or?
So we've got $3 billion approximately in the rainy day fund.
Right.
At the end of fiscal year 23, and there'll be about a $2.5 billion projected surplus.
When we came in, that number was $600 million. So that's the delta, that's the difference in what's being handed over to the new administration.
Thank you. Other questions?
Governor Hogan, I noticed in your recommendations, nowhere, unless I missed it, nowhere there was any recommendations for further tax relief or tax cuts. What are your thoughts on that going forward?
Well, like I said, we have cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion. This year and last year were both the largest tax cuts in history. Obviously, we could recommend that they continue that trend, but I'm not sure that they have the same philosophy as us.
Are there any specific projects or initiatives that you're worried that the next administration might waste money on?
No, I'm very pleased that they're putting their team together. They're meeting with our budget team. I don't know about specifics. They hopefully will be continuing to take the state in the same direction. Anybody else?
When you're out of office, if you see the Moore administration moving in a direction that you think is bad for the state, do you intend to
No, I don't think so. You know, I mean, I always pretty much tell people what I think, but I'm going to do my best to not comment on the daily decision-making of the next administration. And, you know, I'm very content that, you know, we've completed the job that we set out to do, and I wish them all the best in their future endeavors, but I don't think I'm going to spend my time commenting on their actions. Anybody else? All right, well, in closing, I gave a shout out to Lieutenant Governor. I wanted also our health secretary here is in front row during the pandemic. What an incredible job leading us through that. Dennis Schrader, thank you. And I want to thank my chief of staff, Amelia Chasse Alcivar, who's done a great job leading us. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you.